Great, thanks everybody for coming out. My name is Matt Berry. I work within the innovation economy at JP Morgan. Just a quick blurb about us. So we're effectively covering anyone from seed through growth equity stage companies, trying to provide them with thoughtful advice so they can scale exponentially. And that can be something as simple as opening a checking account or doing some sort of interest rate swaps, with different currencies. So there's really no deal or question that's going to be too big or too small to get their support from JP Morgan. And thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully I'll have the chance to work with everybody in this room in one form or another at some point, and just looking to be supportive in the ecosystem. So thank you.
Well, I'm the Canada Gates representative, so I want to welcome everybody to Conference Room 1. I'm sorry we couldn't bring out the blue sky and sun. Maybe we'll have a little break. It's lucky when that happens. My name is CJ Voss. I'm a member of our corporate transactions group based here in Seattle, and I see a couple colleagues, including Whitney McCullum, who's a member of our data privacy and security group, and Alex Imus, who's also a member of our corporate group. We have pretty long ties, deep ties to the emerging growth and venture capital space. We helped form a company called Microsoft in the mid-'80s. They did pretty well. We founded and helped support and were primary sponsors for the two primary angel investment organizations in the Pacific Northwest, the Alliance of Angels and Element 8, formerly known as the Northwest Energy Angels. We're active with the Clean Tech Alliance and its incubator. And working with emerging growth companies, entrepreneurs, and early stage investors is a pretty important part of our practice. So we're delighted to sponsor this with Mucker and JP Morgan, and look forward to an interesting discussion today. Thank you.
All right, so we've got a great panel today for everybody. Great group of founders here. So to start things off, let's just have each person kind of introduce themselves, tell us a little bit of background about the company, like a short elevator pitch or whatever the blurb is, and any kind of traction metric you would care to share, whether that's how much you've raised or where you are as the size of the company, whatever you feel like you're comfortable sharing. So let me start over here, Samar.
Hi. Hello. I am Samar Singla. So I run a company called JungleWorks. So we are like Shopify for hyperlocal retailers. And on the metric side, so we are a bootstrap company, profitable always, about 10 years old. Never raised any money. We are about, we power about 1 million transactions a day in over 100 countries. So we are spread out a lot in pretty much like small countries. You go to a country where there is a war, we probably are the company who's going to power the commerce there.
Interesting, very cool.
My name is Christie Lagally. I'm the founder and CEO of Rebellyous Foods. We're right here in Seattle. What we do at Rebellyous is we make plant-based chicken available and affordable for everyone. We specifically serve the USDA National School Lunch Program, which is our public anti-poverty feeding program within our public schools, our 14,600 public school districts in the United States. We've been around for about 6 years. We've raised around $30 million, primarily to design technology that makes plant-based meat faster, better, and cheaper so that we can serve the USDA National School Lunch Program. So we consider ourselves a climate tech company, a social justice company, and also our goal is to simply make plant-based meat alternatives available for everyone so we can make more climate-friendly choices.
Cool.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean, co-founder and CTO of Swiftly. We build retail tools for brick and mortar retailers, kind of everything from Target and 7-Eleven down to your corner grocery and convenience store. And we power it with a retail media network so that brands, everyone from Pepsi's to a local brand, can advertise to those shoppers. We support about 55,000 stores across the US and about 10 million consumers that are active, either downloaded their retailer's mobile app or go to their website each month.
Hello, I'm Paul Mikesell, founder and CEO of Carbon Robotics. We build AI-based robots for agriculture. And the thing that we make that's most prominent is the laser weeder. So we have an AI system on this big machine that's got a lot of cameras, and the AI is finding weeds in the farmers' fields and then burning them out with lasers. Okay, so what this means is no herbicide spray, right? No chemicals. You don't no people in the field, which is good for people and it's good for immigration policy and all this other stuff. No tillage, no blades in the soil. We don't touch the soil, so we don't disrupt that topsoil layer. And we're good for the land, good for the farmers, and we've raised $84 million to date. Our first year of selling was in 2022. We tripled revenue from 2022 to 2023. We'll double again this year. We'll double again next year. We're growing really fast. Machines around the world. Maybe you've seen some of the laser weeders on social media or like NBC Nightly News, etc. And if not, and you're curious, please look us up on your favorite social media site, Carbon Robotics. Thank you.
Cool.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Arzeno, CEO of Assurance IQ. We're a direct-to-consumer distribution platform for insurance products, mostly Medicare, health, and life insurance. I joined as part of the founding team in early 2017 as the chief data scientist, helped to build our data science, ML engineering, and data engineering teams. We were bootstrapped, so we didn't raise any money. We were bootstrapped by our two co-founders, Mike Rowell and Mike Paulus. And in 2019, we were acquired by Prudential Financial for $2.35 billion, and we continue to run as a fully owned subsidiary of Prudential. In 2021, so about a year and a half after the acquisition, I took over as CEO of Assurance.
Hi everyone, my name is Esha Joshi. I'm co-founder and CPO at a company called Yoodli. We are based in Seattle, YOODLI, based out of the Allen AI Institute by Gasworks Park. We are a team of 13 people, seed stage, raised about $7 million, and we are trying to build the Grammarly for speech. So if you are anyone who gets nervous public speaking, sitting on a panel, giving an interview, projecting confidence in a meeting, asking for a raise, giving a sales pitch, then you can come to Yoodli and do some simulated role play and get feedback on your tone, pitch, intonation, use of disfluencies like ums and uhs, body language, posture, gesture, content, structure, so on and so forth. We're working with coaches, executive coaching companies, interview placement companies, career transitioning folks, outplacement folks, as well as a number of different enterprises, mid-market, across the United States.
Do we all get scores after?
We actually do not give scores because we do not subscribe to a prescriptive scoring model because we don't want everyone to sound like Winston Churchill or Nelson Mandela or Obama. But we do help you become aware of your speaking patterns and habits so that you can decide how you want to tweak it. And we'll give you benchmarks against what other types of people are doing so you can see where you are and where you might want to go.
Super interesting. Wow, I feel like everybody here has such an interesting thing that they're working on. I'm curious as to how you guys landed on this problem that you guys are solving, right? Everything from a couple of bootstrapped companies here that are much further along, than some companies that have raised a ton of money, right? So maybe we start with you, just Samar. But like, how did you guys? I know we just talked about this briefly, but you went from producing livestock feed and building a company off of that into going into tech and offering a SaaS product to.
Yes. So honestly, I didn't really plan to, be an entrepreneur. So I was studying physics. I was going to do a PhD in applied physics, and I realized I can't do that. And so I thought, okay, what's the, easiest thing I can do after that? So my father was in poultry and started that company, did fairly well and sold that company. So at that point, I didn't really know what to do. So started consulting used to study at Stanford, so it was easy for me to find customers in Silicon Valley who were looking to get anything made, and I had a team in India. So that's how I started. At that point, I think on-demand wave was just starting out, like Uber was very small, Airbnb, all these companies were really just starting out. And I felt that, eventually there would be, smaller companies or larger enterprises who would want this technology as a B2B SaaS rather than trying to build or rather than, Uber or DoorDash taking all the market, right? So that's really, how we started. And yeah, it's just really one thing led to another, not a very thought out, planned decision.
And how old now is JungleWorks, and how long have you been working on it?
So we are about 12 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we started out as a service company, just
Yeah.
building everything bespoke. And about 6 years ago, we actually became a pure SaaS platform.
Yeah,
which
where
is
basically you
self-serve.
now have like a productized
Yeah.
solution that you can sell into different types
Yeah,
of
it's a pretty
businesses.
self-serve platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How'd you guys make that decision?
To become self-serve?
Yeah.
In fact, interestingly, so we had a customer who was also a VC out of UK. So he was using our product, and he said, I really love the product, but if you want to scale it, you have to make it cheap, and if you want to make it cheap, you have to kind of make it self-serve. And I think this was maybe 6-7 years ago. That got me thinking, and he guided me through the whole journey, and we just made it self-serve. And we realized that he was right, because eventually we wanted to be in countries which can't afford expensive technology, and also to work with small companies that can't afford a lot of money for technology. So yeah.
Very cool. And for Rebellyous, I mean, I'm a vegan, so I kind of I get the whole compassion for animals part. But to go into the school system versus like going to the grocery as a distribution channel, like I guess number one is, how did you end up in this world, and then two, the way that you decided to go to market with the product, like how did you guys go down this path of?
Yeah, so it kind of starts with where I started. My background is in mechanical engineering. I spent most of my career in the aerospace industry, primarily at Boeing commercial airplanes, working on the 777 and the 777X. But like many people, I wanted to do something in social justice. But for me, being an engineer, I figured I really need to figure out a way to make meat replaced and large scale. So as a lot of plant-based meat had its day in the sun in terms of the growth of Impossible and Beyond, and I'm actually pretty happy that those days are behind us, because we really believe in developing technology that's possible to replace the technology that is currently driving the meat industry. So if you don't already know, most of your meat is actually processed by huge machines, robots, and things like that. My dream for Rebellyous Foods was to essentially design the equipment to make plant-based meat faster, better, and cheaper, so that plant-based meat could be the norm where it needs to be the norm. Particularly for climate change reasons, I think most climate scientists now realize how much meat we need to replace. It's well on the order of about 80% of current meat production, which is over 779 billion pounds globally at the moment per year. So it's a lot of meat, and so we've been developing the technology. I took my Boeing background and said, let's design the equipment necessary to make plant-based meat faster. But we also needed a market, and I was inspired by the volunteer work I had done while I was at Boeing to actually choose a market that most needs plant-based meat, which for us, that was what we call kind of the care channel, which is schools, hospitals, prisons, places where people would not otherwise get high-quality meat anyway, and replacing those as the most important avenues. However, it also turns out in the United States, we produce 52 billion pounds of animal-based chicken. 2.3 billion of that goes directly to our public school system. So we feel like that's a really good market for a high-volume production system that we've been developing. So that's why the market, and that's why we ended up. It was really my background that ended up, developing a company around manufacturing technology, and then the market followed, because we needed a market where we didn't have to know any marketing. No offense to everybody's marketing, but I don't know any marketing. So that's the great thing about those particular channels.
How'd you get plugged into there?
I was actually inspired to start the company by the business development VP I have now, which her name is actually also Christie. She was at the Humane Society of the United States, and she said, somebody really needs to start a low-cost plant-based chicken company. Well, it turns out you can't make bad chicken, plant-based chicken. You have to make really, really good plant-based chicken at a low cost. And for those of you who know technology, that's a fantastic technology challenge. So her goal was to bring low-cost plant-based chicken to the public school system even before she joined us. So I made that part of our mission, and then later on I was able to hire her.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so she drives that effort now.
Cool. And Sean, how'd you land up on yours?
You know, my co-founders and I were at a previous startup, and we built a e-commerce platform that was used by a lot of CPG brands. Our customers were Pepsi and Fiji Water and General Mills and Kraft, and we were helping them to go online. And you know, through the course of that business, we realized that their biggest challenge was not the nuts and bolts of how do I operate an e-commerce website or get products to consumers' doors. It's actually how do I find my customers? And these are iconic brands, but it was really, really difficult for them to find their shoppers online and to market to them effectively, make the unit economics work after all the marketing costs. So we had this kind of insight that we thought, well, gosh, you know, who actually has these customers? Because these brands are huge, and it's really grocery stores. And that led us back in like 2017 to this belief that ultimately grocery stores would be kind of the next Google, because ultimately that's who controls the shopper relationship, who has all of the purchase data that you need to be able to personalize ads for shoppers. And ultimately, if you could find a way to unlock that digitally, then there was a big opportunity there. And like personally, I've been a big fan of Starbucks since like 2004 or so. I got pretty addicted. Back when I was at Microsoft, I worked on the Starbucks app on the Windows platform, and that was all about how do we get consumers into the store more frequently, get them to buy products they've never tried before. And then I thought, well, gosh, if we just take what like really worked about the Starbucks app and did that in grocery, I bet you that would work even better. And so we started building a company around it, and brought on some stores, brought on some advertisers, and found that it works even better than it did for Starbucks. So we've been building ever since.
Interesting. So do you guys, do you work with the grocery stores, or do you work with grocery stores? Okay.
Yeah, so our customers, we have, it's a marketplace business,
Yep.
and that was one of the things that was really challenging to start. I think being second-time entrepreneurs really helped us in that sense.
Yeah.
Because you have to do a lot to start a marketplace business, and you have to jumpstart both sides. Yeah. But
I'm familiar with that one, yeah.
And for us, it's really three sides because there's a consumer as well. So our customers are the grocery stores. We provide a tech platform for them that's kind of like Shopify, but it's your mobile app. So if you download the JungleWorks, the Homeland, the Lucky's supermarkets mobile app, that's our technology that powers that. Then we engage consumers onto that mobile app platform. So we have some pretty cool products on about half the bottles of wine that you see on that back table, and the alcohol there as well. We have really strong rebate products that we sell to alcohol manufacturers, for example, as a reason to get you to download the app. So you can get $5 off that 12-pack of Stella, which is a pretty good deal. And then we sell ads to CPG companies. So the Pepsis and the General Mills of the world buy ads, and ultimately that's become an increasingly important revenue stream for grocery stores. Because when you think about it, who are they competing with? Walmart and Amazon. Well, who are the biggest advertisers today? It's Google, and then Meta, and then number 3 is Amazon. And that just came out of nowhere. And Amazon is larger than like the next 5 combined, right? It's not even close. And retail media is something like 62% of Amazon's profit. For Walmart, it's 12% of their profit. Walmart did $3.5 billion, something like that, in advertising revenue last year. So if I'm a grocery store, I'm struggling to compete with Walmart as is, just on lower prices. Gosh, if they've got this high margin advertising revenue stream, I really need an answer now. And you know, we were just very fortunate that we kind of called this trend. Now it's called retail media. At the time we started the company, it didn't have a name, but we were pretty early to market on that and kind of got a 5-year head start on everyone else.
But you guys started off with a different business, right? Before that, how'd you make the decision to pivot into this?
Well, we sold that company.
Oh, got it.
So we sold that company to a private equity group, and we're kind of thinking, you know, what do we do next? And I've always been enamored with this kind of in-store technology and what we could do inside the brick and mortar retail store. And we started this company. We went out and we raised actually from a lot of people in the CPG space, so people that had run grocery stores or run CPG brands, and they really understood kind of the market need, and we started building.
How long between the two companies? From when you guys sold to the start of another one?
We had been kicking around the idea while we were at the previous companies, so everything kind of blends together. We didn't get the super nice interlude and vacation and the sit on the beach for 3 months. We really got right back in the saddle.
Very cool. And then lasers and weeds.
Yeah. Carbon robotics. Yeah. So I was working at Uber. I started the deep learning team there, which is the main AI systems we were using for self-driving cars, as well as a bunch of other stuff. We were doing building entrance and exit predictions from satellite photos, all the gamut of everything that you could possibly do with a neural net. And I vested out my 4 years there and wanted to go do something new. And so what could we do with this new technology that was not the same as everything else? Everybody was doing new advertising, analytics, optimization, and there were 50 self-driving car companies. And I started talking to farmers, and I realized that they have all of this land. They have a lot of problems. There are whole generations of technology evolution that just sort of passed them by. And it seemed like a pretty obvious place to go start investigating. And then when I discovered the way that we're currently doing the way we grow our food, particularly in our Western cultures, has just a massive amount of chemicals going into it. Okay, a lot of problems, downstream problems in the environment, health effects, all kinds of problems, especially to the farmers. They get a lifetime of exposure that causes cancer and Parkinson's and all this stuff. So got it working with the laser. I plugged the laser into my AI systems, and I was like, I can kill these weeds. And started raising money.
You say so nonchalantly.
Well, it was
yeah.
It all kind of blurs together too, but it was a lot of experimentation. Yeah. And I remember early on, some of the venture capitalist folks, they would go talk to John Deere, who is dominant in the industry, and ask them, what do you think about this guy trying to kill weeds with lasers? And everybody would come back and say, it's impossible, that's not going to work. People have tried this, it won't work. But I had it working, so I was like, well, maybe it's time to get going on this thing. And then it's growing and building and learning more about farmers. And what's interesting about this space is there's so little investment in agriculture and ag tech generally. It's kind of amazing to me. Things are geographically separated. Things are politically separated. It's a different way of thinking about what work is, right? So the money is just, you'll fund, 100,000, iPhone apps to do whatever before anybody will think about investing in ag tech. So I hope we're going to change the perception of that. I hope, we'll keep pushing and keep going. I think we'll get to the point that we'll have a pretty nice IPO that will set a different standard, right? We're not just looking to get acquired by John Deere for some low, lame valuation and try to help these farmers get to a new place. It's time to do it now because these advancements in AI give machines the ability to learn things about the world that are required for the kinds of perception to do this work. And it's just so obvious to me that there's massive opportunities there in agriculture that are just not being taken advantage of today.
Yeah. I'm curious, I have worked with a few ag companies on go-to-market, that front, and farmers are a very different breed of buyer personas, right? So how did you guys, I would imagine it's almost like you just have to do a show and tell, right? It's like this, it works. It's not just, we're just
it was a lot of, they saw us showing up too. It's engineers in the field, in trailers, hacking code, hacking electronics. We were talking about the pandemic and what that was like. Why had people actually literally in these fields and trailers, 5 people side by side and a table and chairs in there trying to figure out how to make all this stuff work. Showing up is very important for farmers. The handshake is more important than the contract. So if you say you're going to do something and you're the kind of person that does it, that means a lot to them. And they're the same way. So I've never had a farmer tell me they were going to do something and not do it. So if they say, okay, we're going to buy this thing, the paperwork is just sort of ancillary, right? Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is like, how do we get this technology into a place where it doesn't get in the real world, and that's what drives us.
Yeah, very cool. Allison, you went from chief data officer or data scientist officer?
Yeah.
Into CEO at Assurant, which is a huge company now, 1,200 employees.
Yep.
Right? And you're running that. What was that journey like? I know you've been there for 7 years, and then you transitioned to CEO 3 years ago. But walk us through what that looks like, and how do you evolve into a CEO role when you weren't necessarily an original founder or, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I joined Assurance, and there were, I think, 7 employees at the time that I started and joined the team, they were already very eager to use data to drive the company. So like what attracted me to it was this idea. So we serve mass market consumers. So average household income of somebody we serve is about $45,000. And for the most part in the insurance industry, financial advisors are told, don't bother with this population because you're not going to make enough money. Like you won't make a living as a financial advisor serving the population. And so our idea was, can we use data, can we use technology to actually serve this market and do it as a profitable business? And so that's where I came in to say, like, how do we build models? How do we make the system hyper efficient so that we can solve that problem? And so from day one, data and technology at Assurance was part of the business. We weren't a service function. We weren't an ancillary team. We were deeply ingrained in driving business decisions. And so, many times in which our head of sales or our chief marketing officer would get very angry at me because I would be in there like fiddling around with our data science models and change the logic on how our business was running. And so we were, very much kind of optimizing the business from day one. When we were acquired in 2019, and I generally will say, like, being acquired as a 3-year-old startup has pros and cons. At that point, it was like we were transplanted to an entirely different world and had to figure out how to operate and make it work in an entirely new environment. And at that point, our 2 co-founders basically just said, like, this isn't for me. I think, they recognized that their strengths were on growing something and creating it. And now we were very much in the world of optimizing it. And that is my background, optimization. And so that's kind of how I jumped into this role to say, okay, I think we can keep taking this business to the next level. And how do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So, and then when you came in and with 7 people, like, where was the company then, and how do you feel like, growing from that in a very short amount of time to where you guys are, when you guys got acquired, right?
Yeah.
Like, what was instrumental in that process, and what did you see change or evolve with the team and with yourself in that?
Yeah, so I had, when I joined Assurance, I had been part of the executive team or founding or the founder of a couple different startups.
Okay.
And in both of those experiences, it was the people that made a difference at the end of the day, both like their attitude, their drive, their outlook. And so when I joined Assurance, that was really, I knew nothing about the insurance industry, and candidly, like, most people have no desire to know that much about the insurance industry. But, I looked at this group of people who were super driven, who were really looking to disrupt an industry and wanted to do it with data. And that was really what attracted me into it. And I think it was that, like, hunger and drive that kept us going. And actually in 2019, when we were acquired, we started out in 2018 saying, hey, to reach the next level of growth, we have to raise capital. So what started out as let's assess the market and raise money, we happened into a time in which there was a ton of interest in the insurance industry to acquire technology. And that's how it all played out.
Got it. All right. Cool. How about you? How did you guys end up in In this space.
In the Yoodli space,
Yeah,
yeah.
in this space.
My co-founder and I are first-time founders, so this definitely wasn't something that we had been thinking about deeply. We were both in big tech before. I was a couple years after college, I was working at Apple, or rather after college, I worked at Apple for a couple of years and was based in Los Angeles and London working on launching TV Plus for Apple, so Apple's version of Netflix. I learned that I did not like being at the intersection of tech and entertainment. I'd always wanted to start my own company, but I didn't exactly know what that would look like or when I would do it, who I would do it with, what I would work on, etc. Two of the things that I'm very passionate about, at least professionally, are one, helping women become more confident. Historically, that's meant working with younger women and girls on teaching them programming with various nonprofits. The second thing I'm passionate about is communication. And it's something that I've both struggled at, continue to struggle with, but also take immense joy in. Kind of this idea of being able to speak and kind of captivate an audience. Not saying that I do that by any means, but we know these people who are really good at demanding respect when they speak. Some people do it in a nefarious way, and that's that. And so I thought, what can I put these two together to create something for people like myself and other underrepresented minorities to have this judgment-free environment to speak and practice and get feedback and become more confident. So that's kind of the scope of what Yoodli is. For my co-founder, he's from India, so his motivation a lot is around how do we help people back in his home of India who aren't maybe as schmoozy to be able to get those jobs. A lot of folks are very smart, have incredible things to say, but don't quite know how to say it. Or how to, effectively schmooze in corporate to kind of make that impression moment. So that's the crux behind Yoodli. Quit that, moved to Seattle, and started this, and we've been working on it for about 2 years.
Is your co-founder in Seattle too?
Also based in
Okay.
Seattle. Yeah.
How'd you guys both end up here? Is he based here? Or?
No, so my co-founder and I, we met at a college internship 10 years ago,
Okay.
and we've stayed friends. We came here because of the Lagally Institute.
Okay.
There's an incubator
Yeah.
close to Gasworks Park, and because we're first-time founders, and we're like, it'd probably be good to get some help on building a business from these different go-to-market advisors. So we stepped into that world, and I've been there ever since.
How's that journey been with them?
The journey's been good. I will say that from an incubator standpoint, it's different than an accelerator,
Yeah.
like a Y Combinator, because you have a smaller cohort of companies, whereas with YC, it's like 300 companies, like pretty cutthroat, 3 months, based in the Valley. The goal is like build something and then get money in 3 months, and then do a compelling pitch to get even more money, but in this case, capital. So that is great, but I think it focuses on, my perspective from what I've observed is that it might focus less on like fundamental business building and more around like how do you quickly like de-risk the problem and get money, which I think has its values to it. Whereas this incubator was more around 18-month process around kind of establishing who, what your problem is, who your initial ICP is, who's your co-founder, what is your go-to-market. A little bit different for us because we came in with conviction of this mission, and we came in having each other's co-founders, so we got to jump a lot of like the programming bit. But I think very worth it for folks who are either first-time founders, don't have a network in the space that they're trying to move into, and or trying to find a co-founder.
Cool. Everybody's story seems a little bit very polished in terms of like, it seems very like organic in terms of how you guys ended up where you are, and not too much friction, or it appears to be like made very sensible, like logical next steps, right? It's like, I want to go solve this problem. This problem is something I've been interested in, and you spent a little bit of time in it, and then it developed into a legitimate business. But obviously, as like a founder, just going through, when you do spend 10 years on something, or 5 or 7 or whatever it might be, there's a bunch of ups and downs and roller coasters associated to it of emotions. Any war stories that you guys have that in going through those moments of whether trying to find market fit, or trying to find the first customer, or trying to build something that doesn't work the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time. I know like historically it's just failing forward enough times until you find the thing that works, but curious if anybody had got any great stories to share on that.
I have, if you want to go.
Go ahead.
Well, I have a quick one,
Yeah.
because we all experienced it. We actually launched, we have about 3.5 years of sales data at this point, but we actually launched into the public school system in February of 2020. And then within 20 days, every customer we had gotten over the last, 6 months shut down, entire world shut down. We had no market. It was just evaporated, which I know a lot of people experience that in some shape or form, but who would have thought we would shut all schools down? So we had to pivot really fast into a couple of different weird things. We first of all started doing like donations of public, to public feeding programs for people who weren't getting food at school, which was a complete loss to us, but it was cheaper to give away stuff during the pandemic than it was to keep it in a warehouse. And then the second was that we started selling things in, like, we just made up bags and we sold them to like grocery stores and stuff like that. So that was probably so we ended up having to kind of go into retail full bore. And you asked me earlier about like, are you in retail? And we're like, yes, but we can't wait to get out of it because it's a marketing effort and we're not a marketing company. So I would say we learned hard and fast, and not due to anything that we did wrong. It was just a global pandemic that we had to pivot hard and fast and then get out of it as fast as we possibly could. So we went back to schools as soon as they were open, and that has been a consistent market for us.
Did you learn anything from that process of like, well, maybe you learned that you don't want to do retail?
We learned that we don't want to do retail. We learned that retail is just really, it's a different business. Yeah, in the food
entirely.
industry, retail is a very different business than food service. Retail is about name and brand and everything like that, but I bet no one in here can really name off the top of their head where their last piece of chicken came from. We are actually trying to disrupt the commodity market of meat, not the branded product of meat. And that's how you replace meat on a large scale. If you're going to make an impact for climate reasons, human health reasons, and animal welfare reasons, you replace meat that is commoditized, and that's our true effort. So getting back to that market as fast as we possibly could was really important, and not wasting too much more money on retail. So, yeah.
And that relationship with the schools, was there post-pandemic as well? And was there any like hiccups in getting that started or reignited?
It was. Schools are about two things. Product has to be fantastic. There's like no room for error when it comes to a bad product in the school systems, because if kids don't like it, they will not eat it. They will throw it in the trash and they will never buy from you again. And so the second is just price. It's price parity with animal meat is so necessary. So, I'm sad to say we are one of the few survivors, I would say, of the plant-based meat boom. And I hope there'll be more like us, because simply because we hyper-focused on technology that makes plant-based meat at price parity with animal meat. And price parity may seem like the most non-sexy thing you could work on, but it is what's necessary in order to move the needle on, 779 billion pounds of meat in the world. So.
You want to share something?
Sure. So I think, as you rightly pointed out, it sounds very polished and sort of easy. But, it took us so many years, because this is a very commoditized market, right? As Sean will probably know. And, Shopify is already like humongous. And so it took a lot of time for us to find our niche, right? So initially we started out building these large on-demand apps. And then we realized, okay, smaller merchants need it. But then, there are these hundreds of use cases. So when you buy something from within, let's say, a 5-mile radius, you're buying a service, home cleaning, you're buying like a, dog walker services and all those things. So how do you how do you build a platform that can cater to all these products, right? All these different products and services, because it's one thing, when you are building a product for drop shipping, like an e-commerce website, it's very different when the transaction is happening in real time, right? So I think that took a lot of time, and a lot of failures along the way because we'd build something and then we would assume that, okay, this would always be like that, but somebody would, like laundry, they would come and say, oh no, we have to first pick it up, then drop it again, and then do something again, and we'll get back to the drawing board. So we were very, focused on making sure that the product has to serve all the hyperlocal product use cases. So what we figured out is take a transaction, break it down into different steps from discovery to payment to delivery to customer support, and build a separate product for all of these steps so that you could then generalize every one of those steps. It sounds like very obvious in the hindsight, but it took a lot of because we first tried to build a monolithic system, didn't work, right? And once we had the product right, and then obviously nobody wants it. Right? That's like the standard story. Okay, you build this amazing product in 6-7 years, and now you think the whole world is your customer, and then you go to market and nobody says like, okay, why should I pay for you for this, right? So, and at that time, again, I'm actually not very good at marketing, right? As a company, we realized, we're not, I was always like a background is physics, so kept on thinking that, okay, people will just buy it because they all need it, but you talk to a retailer or a grocer, they just don't want to think about internet, right? They want to sell their product and they just want it to happen magically, they just want to know that, okay, their order has come through internet or wherever, but they don't want to get into the process of doing it. So at that point we realized we don't know how to market, so we started to just focus on word of mouth. In fact, I remember still like the first customer we got some guy in Malaysia, right? I went and met him, and so I asked him like, how did you find us? He obviously didn't know that he was our first customer for the platform. and so he said, yeah, I was just like looking for something. So at that point we realized that we have to go content first and really just go all in. So because of that, again we were able to figure out an underserved market, which is, let's say, Africa's, LATAM, Southeast Asia, which is markets where most of the large companies like Shopify and stuff won't focus on. So it's like a string of failures really, but every time with every failure of not being able to do something, you would find a way to move around that. Right? So at this point, its idea is first you build the product, works fine, and then the problem now is how do you build and keep building these content and these viral pushes which keep getting customer to us. So I think it's not one big failure story, but a lot of them almost on a monthly basis.
And how do you, I guess like the question comes is like, this probably goes for everybody here that's gone through a lot of these different types of failures, but how do you keep yourself pushing forward, right? Because it's like, it could be, if you look at general population, probably don't have the wherewithal to go at it 10, 50, 100 times. And then doing it over the course of, you're saying like 6-7 years to get to some kind of market fit. Like, is it the founders? Is it is it having gone through entrepreneurship before in the first business? What do you feel like is maybe,
I think honestly, sometimes I do think that, it's a little stupid to keep doing this, right? But at the same time, I think, you have to really love the everyday process.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the result or the scores, so there's this very good book called Score Doesn't Matter, or don't keep the score or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that is really a very important thing for me personally, that I have to enjoy the process on a day-to-day basis rather than trying to think of this as a success or a failure. And that's why, no VCs, less answerability. I don't know how you guys manage it, but it's kudos to you guys. But I think so for me, what works is just keep it simple, enjoy it day to day, and just focus on the process, less on the result.
I'll tell you about some challenges. And this is maybe a warning to everybody in here as well. The things that I've learned about trying to manufacture hardware, particularly heavy hardware, with fabricated metal parts and air conditioning, HVAC, all this stuff that's going to go out into these farms and has to survive. Manufacturing in the United States is totally busted. We have a big, big problem. All of the electronic stuff we get is coming out of Taiwan, first of all, right? So everything is, we don't fab stuff here. We used to. In the 1990s, there was this big push towards fabless semiconductor companies. Didn't mean there was no fab, it meant it all went overseas. Well, we're starting to see the same thing right now with metal fabrication stuff. Everything is going to Mexico. The labor is cheaper, there's less regulations. Same thing with the crops. Our farmers are under the same kinds of pressure. And so if we don't figure out a way as a nation to sort of deal with this scenario, all of our manufacturing, all of our food production, everything that we need in the physical world is going to go away, and we're going to be completely dependent on other nations. This is very dangerous. We used to never have agricultural trade deficits in this country. We were always a net exporter for the last 50 years. 3 of the last 5 years, we've had an agricultural trade deficit. That's unheard of. That's new, okay? So how do we solve this problem? Some suggestions I would have is that for us, we're trying to help the farmers with automation, right? Making people more efficient and effective, have less people being able to achieve more with optimization, right? But we have to solve this problem in manufacturing as well. And we've not solved it. Maybe eventually if carbon robotics gets far enough along in agriculture, we'll be able to help tackle that, but I would like to see more investment in automation and optimizing our manufacturing base in this country. If you're Toyota, sure, you've got everything stamped out and optimized, but if you're anything sub, thousands of units per year, it's literally guys, cutting, folding, bending, welding, painting, right, all of that stuff. And it's very slow, takes a long time, it's very expensive, there's a lot of regulations, like I keep saying. For some reason the FDA has an opinion about the lasers that we import, and certain ones get held at the port and some don't, and it's like, sometimes I'm like, why am I spending all this time trying to build these things in the United States, right? Well, why are we setting people up to have that kind of pressure?
Yeah.
Talking about manufacturers, farmers, everybody trying to do things. There's a big problem, we need to fix it. Think about ways that we could help. I think we'll need to get to a point where our regulations and our regulatory bodies start thinking about things in that way, not just how do we go in there and sort of, make sure they're not doing anything wrong. It's like, how do we help these businesses become competitive on a global scale?
Did you start realizing that at Uber, or did you start realizing that when you started to build this?
It really hit hard at Carbon Robotics, because we're building big machines and there's a lot of metal fab. We build these in Detroit right now, and we thought probably naively, we'll take advantage of this great history of manufacturing out there. There's all these people who have the expertise, they can help us figure it out. It turns out that the car manufacturers, the historical United States car manufacturers, are not exactly the best and brightest in optimization and new manufacturing techniques. You probably could have guessed that. We discovered it head on. So what we're winding up doing now is sort of setting up our own way of doing this and making things in a way where we can produce them at our speed and our quality level, but we were having to do this from the ground up, basically. We've been able to achieve that. But it makes me really concerned about where we're going to go in the future. Some examples: why is the whole entire crop of traditional U.S. manufactured automobiles, I'm talking about Ford, GM, why are their EVs basically garbage? Why is Tesla able to show up and have this, right? Because they started from the beginning, they started all over again, right? So that's a real problem. And in the long term, it's going to bite us when suddenly everything's coming from other countries.
Yeah.
It's a good point. There's no part of starting something that's easy. And, a lot of people think that the journey is often glamorized, but it is, I think it was NVIDIA's CEO that said have a high pain tolerance, or have low expectations. Have low expectations, and then I can't remember who it was that said have a high pain tolerance, but you really need both of those to start something, because there are so many challenges that you end up having to overcome. And I remember even when we were first starting, we couldn't raise money. And we went and we pitched Silicon Valley VCs. We went to other markets, we pitched VCs there, and they all came back and universally told us, like, hey, I like to invest in things that have one hard problem. And you're trying to build a marketplace business. So I've got 3 hard problems to solve. Can you get retailers? Can you get consumers? Can you get advertisers? And so, for that reason, this is not for me. And, maybe we should have taken their advice, but we decided screw it, and we kept trying until we found people that's why we raised from people in the CPG space and retailers, because they understood the problem. And so, you keep banging your head into a wall and trying to figure out, like, what is the path through here? And ultimately, there's so many of those situations that you find yourself in company building, and that's the only way that you get through. And frankly, that's actually your barrier to entry. That is your competitive advantage, and that's how you get something that a larger company wouldn't do, is because everybody makes the assumption that it's just too hard.
I think the common point is that everybody has a little bit of stupidity in them.
Yeah, naivete or something. I mean, it was. I think I know what you're talking about with Jensen from NVIDIA. I mean, he's said a lot of things about pain and suffering, and every time they encounter a problem, it's like, we're going to accept all this suffering that's going to come with it, to a certain degree. I mean, I think like he's right, but I also just think that you have to be built a little bit differently to accept it, and then have also a different perspective, where generally if we're raised in the States, like you get an F or you fail in the academic system, it's negative connotation, where I think in Silicon Valley specifically, or the Bay Area, they've done a great job of like fostering the belief of failing and learning from that. The rest of the country, I don't know. Globally, I don't know. But I think every entrepreneur typically carries that perspective of like, okay, this isn't a failure, it's just like realizing one way of not doing something. I know I've encountered that hundreds of times. I don't know if you guys have had any individual experiences in that. I know it's your first startup too. You've done a couple before you joined Assurant, but any stories around those?
I can tell a story before Assurant. So I was running a startup called Qantas, and Qantas had a software and hardware problem. So we were building a wearable device for continuous blood pressure monitoring. So I think Apple's still working on this problem, but the idea of like your wearable device is telling you your blood pressure in addition to your heart rate. And the founding team, so it came out of MIT, that's how I met the co-founders. And from the beginning, they thought their algorithm like worked well enough. And so they were very focused on like building the device and building some like ancillary pieces of it. And it just kind of started to crumble and fizzle apart. And they had raised like a 25 million Series A, like a lot of positive signs and a lot of great momentum. But they reached this moment in which, one, like nobody wants to see their blood pressure on their wrist 24/7. Like, turns out consumers don't actually like that. And the second problem was that the device that they built cost like $1,500 to produce. It was beautiful, but it was really expensive. And so we found ourselves at this point where it was like, nobody can afford this device and nobody wants it, which is a pretty big problem to have. And so at that point, and the core algorithm like didn't actually work well enough for us to launch it. And so I took over, I laid off like 90% of the team. We had a core team of people left, and we just focused on fixing the algorithm to say, hey, if we can fix the algorithm, maybe we can sell it to Apple or Fitbit or somebody else. And we basically, so this was in Mountain View, and we had flyers all over the place for people to come in. We would give them a $20 Amazon gift card if they would let us like stick their hands in ice, watch the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, go on a like stationary bike for 30 minutes, like do all of these things that would take your blood pressure up and down so that we could build this big data set and fix the algorithm. It was amazing how many people were willing to do this in this random office in Mountain View. And so we did all of that. We built this great data set. We fixed the algorithm in a lot of ways. And I thought at the time, like, okay, I'm going to go out to Apple and Fitbit and all of these wearable companies. Someone's going to buy this thing. And we're going to have, it's not going to be a stellar exit, but we're going to exit. And we did that, and all of these companies said, like, your algorithm's great, and it's a little better than what we're doing, but like, meh, not really worth it. And at that point, our VCs, we were funded by Khosla Ventures and Matrix Partners. And we had run out of funding, and nobody wanted to acquire it, and we shut it down. And so it literally ended with me in my garage with 3 storage pods of like devices, chairs, laptops, this like bizarre equipment that you would use for blood pressure, and the venture capitalist saying like liquidate it, like figure out how to get rid of all of this stuff. And that was kind of how Qantas ended. And you know, that was a few months before I then jumped over to Assurance, but it was this story of like technology that actually got a whole lot better, you know, something that I felt like could truly help consumers with hypertension, but just like problem after problem just took us to a pretty bad end.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a big problem to solve too, right? So it's like
Totally.
welcome some big challenges to it.
Yeah.
How long were you working on that?
I was at Qantas for about 3 years.
Okay. Anything with Yoodli?
Yeah, I can share 2 small-ish ones. Before I do, one of the things that I find very amusing, that I love telling folks, is a piece of advice I got from a mentor kind of a few months into starting this, when I was like very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Still am, a little bit less so now, but still am. And so it was a nice sunny day in Seattle, and we were eating some sandwiches, and he was like, Esha, let me tell you something about startups. And I'm like, yeah, let's hear it. And you know, excuse my language for what I'm about to say, but I may not actually say it because I know I'm getting recorded. But he was like, Esha, startups are a mother. And I was like, what? And he was like, startups are just a, and it just kept saying it. They just kept saying that thing. And I'm like, why are you saying that? And he was like, you'll understand, but you'll understand soon enough that like all of these challenges that the folks up here have talked about and other challenges that you'll come through, you'll be like dumbfounded by some of them. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. So now 2 years later, I can talk through one kind of like very tactical challenge that we face that has a somewhat happy ending to it, and then one that's just been like woven into our company's history. So the first one that has a very tactical ending, like your previous company Qantas, you know, you put the watch on and it gives you a reading on your blood pressure. For us, I talked about how like practice and simulated role play is integral to our user flow, whereby people can practice and they'll get feedback on various parameters, one of which is pacing. Pretty standard, nothing rocket science, but you know, one of those parameters where a lot of people struggle to speak and vary their pace. They speak very, very quickly. In particular, folks who learn English as a second language will speak very, very, very quickly. I learned English as my first language. I still speak pretty fast. So it's a helpful metric. And we have a very basic UI to it. Y'all could probably imagine what that might look like. It's similar to like a car speedometer. One day we get slapped with a lawsuit from a pretty large company, much, much bigger than ours. I won't get into the specifics around saying like the UI of this looks very similar to our UI, and one part of our business does that. And we were like, okay, we should all just pack our bags and go home. Like there's no way that we're gonna be able to fight this. We have funding, but not enough to go up against this larger company. And it became then this couple-month journey of figuring out like, how do we, like, why is this happening to us? Who is doing this? How can we resolve it? And like, how do we get through this without being broke? It just so happens that one of our investors, which is actually Madrona, right across the street, they have a venture partner who's like really good friends with an executive at the company. So got us in contact with them, and through lots and lots and lots of conversations and confusion and like us trying to figure out our UI and change it and fight and go back and forth, we were able to talk to them, and they were like, I don't really even understand what this lawsuit is. So like some ego of somebody trying to pick on little Yoodli, I don't know why, but now we've been talking to them, and once we understood what they wanted and they understand where we are at, we're actually now working with them, which is a lovely story, but it went through a lot of heartache. And this kind of brings me to the second sort of set of challenges we've had, which is a go-to-market challenge, interwoven. I talked about why I started this company, which is to help people like myself, like you and me, underrepresented minorities, be able to speak with confidence. So my mission is in B2C. Like that's what I love. You know, we're Grammarly for speech. Grammarly had a strong kind of individual component before it pivoted to enterprise. And for us, pivoting to enterprise feels icky, you know? It's like we're the buyers, not the user. We're kind of getting funneled around. We're not really helping individuals with their confidence and their challenges. We're helping companies get richer. And sort of the situation where we were resisting that for so long that we probably wasted a little bit of time, trying to make product-led growth with B2C work, optimizing here and there to see small percentage conversions and being oh my goodness, this is not going to work if we're trying to become a bigger company. Going into B2B2C and selling to coaches who have money to spend, but the market's not that big. And so I think the lesson there is you can stay good to your intuition, but sometimes there's a much bigger problem, a much bigger market on another side of the mountain. And if you spin it differently on that other side of the mountain, even though we now sell into sales enablement and corporate comms and leadership and development, but mostly sales enablement, there's a component of helping people with their confidence get more sales certified and get sales trained so that they can go and sell. And there is a big confidence component there. So yeah, those are the two stories.
Awesome, very cool. We're pretty much on time. I think we'll take some questions if people have them, but before we do that, any just last anecdotes any of you individually would like to share to anybody that's a founder currently struggling, maybe feeling a little isolated in their journey? Any words of encouragement or advice that you can give them, or anybody who's looking to be a founder, just anything that's practical?
I mean, just remember, everybody gets told no a lot.
Yeah.
And you only need one yes to keep going.
Fair enough. Anybody else?
I was at the Whole Foods off of First Hill. Ran into a friend of mine one day. We went to school together since kindergarten, and turned out she had moved here to found and start a company, and so we became kind of drinking buddies. And we had this one word that we would just keep on going back and forth with each other on, and it was the stress. And these were the early days, and we would just talk about the stress. And I think we understood each other, both being founders. It's there's nobody else that you can really confide that in. Not your employees, certainly not your investors, but knowing that there's other people that understand that have gone through it, because it's never as easy as anybody glamorizes it to be. It's always painful, but the highs are high. The lows are low, but the highs are high, and that's ultimately what you have to hold on to get through it and to grow.
For sure. I mean, I will say too, I think that journey, especially if you take on institutional capital, is that if you're a CEO, you have to be the captain of the ship in front of your employees, but you're still answering to the board, and that's a tricky road to navigate sometimes, right? Because it is very lonely in that sense, because you're not fully autonomous, right? You have other people that are vested into you, and so that part's tricky. I think a lot of founders don't necessarily get that bit of advice when they do take on external capital. On that note, anything else to share before we open up to questions?
You make a good point about that, just that you're beholden to your board. In early days, it's mostly VCs.
Yeah.
The one advice I'll give other founders who are starting down this road is you got to call your VCs. Don't just talk to them at board meetings. You need to call them all the time and make sure that they feel like they're part of the company. Yeah. Otherwise, weird stuff happens. I learned that the hard way in one of my other companies, so it's a regular thing to do now.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And then also after this, stick around. We have a happy hour thanks to JP Morgan. They got food, got drinks. And so if you want to have any individual questions to any of the founders here too, feel free to engage if they decide to stick around. Any questions? Take one or two. Yeah.
I've got one. This is more for Christie, Paul, and Allison. And Allison, this is before you're acquired, because I think after acquisition you have a team to help you. But you're in a more highly regulated space, and wondering how you navigate that when you're growing and trying to build something, but facing the regulations as well.
Good question.
Well, I can jump into that. You're absolutely right. The USDA National School Lunch Program is directed by the Child Nutrition Program, and it is fundamentally written into the Farm Bill that gets written every 10 years, and its legacy from 1950. So we follow the rules is what we do, and we We maintain, well, part of what we do is we design equipment that makes sure we can maintain the precise recipes necessary to serve the National School Lunch Program. Obviously, in terms of ingredients, we have to use US-grown soy. We have only soy, is the only meat alternative, protein, plant-based meat alternative that is acceptable in the USDA National School Lunch Program. I would love that to change, but it will literally take an act of Congress, literally, not figuratively. And I hope somebody does it someday. But it's mostly just about following the rules. And then in terms of things like food safety, I'm both shocked and surprised. Shocked, what was I going to say? Shocked and the other way, not shocked. How much food safety is an entirely empirical thing, meaning that you try something, you test, you see if it's safe, and then you make sure, you've been through this, right? And then you write your own food safety plan, and, maybe one inspector will come see you every once in a while. But ultimately, you don't really get a second chance. Well, I guess lots of places get second chances. But for a small company like ours, making sure you do it right the first time is just about intent.
At Microsoft, we called it eating our own dog food, but I guess that's a little different.
With respect to...
Try your own product.
Oh, try your own product. Well, we eat our own product all the time. We like it. It's good.
I think for us, one of the big problems is even knowing what the regulations are. We've got USDA, NOP, FDA. In California, we've got CARB. We've got all of this stuff, and it's like, I go to these conferences and they say, you need to engage with your regulators. I'm like, who are the regulators? What? And that's, for me, the biggest challenge is like, who is interested in what we're doing? How do we engage with them? And if you know what you're supposed to be doing, you can usually figure it out. I think the challenge is figuring out what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah, I think so one is, one of our earlier hires was a CLO specifically to focus on this space. And at the time, I was fighting for more data scientists and ML engineers. And so I was sitting there like, what are we doing? Like, is this the right hire? And like, absolutely was. But I think the reality was, and maybe what most startups don't realize is pre-acquisition, like you're a nobody. Like unless you, are able to bootstrap yourself to huge profitability, huge employee base, like nobody cares about you. And that counts for the regulators in a lot of ways. And, even if you get some splashy articles here or there and you're a unicorn according to your valuation, like you're not their biggest problem. But as soon as we were acquired, we got a whole lot more attention. And so that's also something that I would say to, people who are founding companies in a regulated space, like pay attention to it, even if it seems like maybe you don't need to right now. Because if you do have the outcome you're searching for and you want and that you're going to be proud of, all of a sudden these things are going to become much bigger problems for you.
Good question. Anything else? Anybody else? Good to go? All right, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you guys for joining us. That was great. And feel free to hang around.
Thank
you guys.
Thank